Hello again, and welcome to this week's meditation. I do hope you get as much from this, or something like as much from this, as I do in preparing these weekly meditations. We've moved on from seeing God in nature to explore how we see God in daily life, events, and relationships. St. Paul wrote about one of God's fundamental patterns of living, that communication creates trust, and that trust and communication working together create love. Last week we had a first look at communication. So this week we're going to allow God to speak to us about trust. When we use the word faith, it tends to get confined to a religious context. But faith is really trust. And trust is the foundation of our currency, economics, relationships, marriages, family life, communities, etc., etc. Understanding the fundamental nature of trust to all of these things enables us to begin to see God in our daily lives. So we'll begin in our usual way and follow our threefold pattern of finding stillness, and then listening to God, hearing God speak to us through verses from the Bible, and then time for our own conversation with God, which is not part of this recording. And then finally, some time for intercession if you wish to use that as well. So I'm going to turn the camera around again. I'm using the same picture as last week of St. Bernard and Christ by Francesco Volta, and I hope that's of some help to you. So I'm going to turn the camera around and we'll begin. So, in our usual way, we find ourselves somewhere comfortable to sit, feet flat on the floor, legs nice and relaxed, and weight being taken through our spines, our heads resting neatly on the top of our shoulders, shoulders just back, not forced back, but in a relaxed way, and our arms and hands simply resting. Once we've got ourselves seated comfortably, then the next thing we do is focus on our breathing. There's no magic to it. It's just a simple way of distracting our minds. And it's been found that as we breathe more slowly, so our heart rate goes down and our brains begin to settle into a slower way of thought. And in that slower way of thought, we begin to see things more clearly. So sitting comfortably, simply begin to focus on your breathing. Begin to breathe more slowly, more deeply. Get a sense of being able to give unhurried time. And indeed that we are doing the most important and creative things any human being can do, which is simply to be in the presence of God. Allow him to love us and to find our love for him growing in return. So breathe more slowly, more deeply. Remember with thanks the gift of life, the gift of air, breath, the breath of God, the Holy Spirit living in us, preparing our hearts to meet with God. Unveiling God's purposes and desires for our lives. It's good to have some silence, and though we might find the thoughts that erupt distracting, then they're not distractions. They are simply what's on our minds, things that need to be noticed, sometimes noted, but generally allowed to pass. So it's good to take 5 or 10 breaths slowly and deeply to allow that process to unfold. It's like passengers getting off a bus. It's just our minds unloading. You may feel a great sense of excitement. It's a lot about this time being free time in which we are the freest we possibly can ever be. Free to be with God, free to be ourselves. Free to allow God to take us where he wants. So do take as much time as you need to find stillness. It's a great benefit of these recordings and of technology that we can simply hit a pause button and take as long as we want to find that place of stillness. I get to move on now to read some verses from the Bible about faith, the connection in the way in which faith is not a piece of magic. It's not something that comes out of the ether, but faith is a response to hearing God. And so Paul says in Romans, as we began to look at last week, so faith comes by hearing the message, and the message comes through the word of Christ. Faith is simply what we do with what we hear from God. Faith is open to anyone. It was a Roman centurion rather than a Jew that replied to Jesus, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. And Jesus said, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. Communication creates faith. Trust. And trust has limitless possibilities. Jesus said, everything is possible for him who believes. And wonderfully, the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. Message version of the Bible translates Paul's words in Romans 1 like this. It's news I'm most proud to proclaim, this extraordinary message of God's powerful plan to rescue everyone who trusts him. So communication begets trust, a response of some form of action. And right back early in the Bible, as God began to give his instructions to human beings, he said, the word is very near you. It's in your mouth and in your heart, so that you may do it. Communication, spoken words have great power, though they are invisible. Faith has unlimited power, though it too is invisible. St. Paul put these principles together in Romans 4, as he said, Abraham is our father in the sight of God, in whom he believed. The God who gives life to the dead and calls things that are not yet as though they were. Against all hope, Abraham in hope believed, and so became the father of many nations. Communication breeds trust. Trust seeks expression. And so invisible words and invisible trust create tangible, life-giving events. So the writer to the Hebrews puts it, by faith we believe that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made from what was visible. The invisible brings into being the visible. So at this point, please do pause the recording and spend your own time with God, reflecting on these words, or better still, anything that the Holy Spirit may have put into your hearts as you have listened, as different things have come to mind. And if there's nothing that you particularly want to think about, well, think about everyday life in terms of what you communicate, what's communicated to you, where trust is in your work life or your family life or your community life. And in a few moments, I will begin some intercession based around these principles of communication, trust, and love. So giving a moment or two to invite the Holy Spirit to lead us into a person or situation for which we are to pray today. Someone or something we want to bring to God's attention, not that it hasn't already got his attention, or they haven't already got his attention, but so that we might have a conversation, so that we might begin to see the person or the situation through God's eyes. And so see his plans and purposes. Life-giving Father, you spoke the universe into being. We listen to you. Flesh and blood, Jesus, you spoke grace and truth. We listen to you. Outpoured Spirit, you speak with tongues of fire and yet a still small voice. We listen to you. Life-giving Father, your words create faith and you watch for response. We trust you. Flesh and blood, Jesus, supreme messenger, you speak and we believe. We trust you. Outpoured Spirit, you go between, carrying God's words to us and our words to him. We trust you. Life-giving Father, you speak in love, you act in love, and somehow you entrust us with love. We open our hearts to you. Flesh and blood, Jesus, you speak in love, you heal in love. You give yourself sacrificially in love. We open our hearts to you. Outpoured Spirit, breather of divine love into our hearts and generator of true love within us. We open our hearts to you. So do go on using this intercession as much as you want to. Wind it back again, restart it, go through it again, pray for somebody else, whatever you like, or finish as that's your time to do so. That's the end of this week's recording, and there will be another recording next week on the subject of love. And following on after that, we'll begin to explore communication, trust, and love, each in turn more deeply. Thanks for listening so far, and of course, if there's anything I can help further with, please don't be afraid to ask. Thanks so much. Bye for now.